Thank you everyone for coming. I just wanted to start as well by acknowledging the Gadigal people and of the Eora Nation whose lands we meet on today, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and of the future. I also want to acknowledge the ongoing legacy of colonisation that presents itself in the residential care and out-of-home care system, and in many of our institutions that we practice within as social workers. So just to start with a little bit of a very brief background on the project that my PhD was in. So my PhD research was embedded within a broader ARC-funded project titled the DICE project. So that project emerged in response to recommendations out of the Royal Commission about addressing the high rates of child sexual exploitation in residential care. Despite the agreement from all states and territories to take affirmative steps towards the recommendations in the Royal Commission, limited action and limited steps taken towards that. So the DICE project aimed at addressing that gap. So just to kind of quickly explain what I'm referring to when talking about child sexual exploitation, because it's again not a term that's always referenced, nor is there a universal definition for child sexual exploitation in use. It's referring to a form of child sexual abuse whereby there's a exchange of abuse and power, and the child or young person is receiving something they want or need in exchange for the abuse. So that can be tangible things like drugs and alcohol, money, lifts around, and it can also be intangible things like perceived kind of status, affection, and love from the perpetrator. So, my PhD research embedded within that project was really looking at the perceptions of children and young people in residential care. There's really a limited, uh, there's been limited research undertaken that actually speaks to children and young people about this issue, and very limited research in the Australian context outside of the Royal Commission. So, my PhD research was grounded in a feminist and child's rights framework. Um, and I also was really fortunate to speak to police as well in New South Wales. So, that was currently serving New South Wales police officers. Um, that was to also get a kind of better understanding of the current nature of police practice in this area, and to kind of provide a bit of context around the experiences described by the young people. So there was a total of 23 participants, 10 of whom were young people who either were currently living or had previously lived in residential care. And then the other 13 were currently serving New South Wales police officers. I'm really going to focus on the findings of my research because I think they're really important. And in keeping with the child rights and feminist frameworks, I really thought it was important to actually include the young people's voices as much as possible today. So you'll see that there's quotes on the screen that refer to the findings that I'm talking about. I won't read them out because I think we do have limited time, but I think you'll see that they really speak to the themes that I'm going to discuss. So first and foremost, when speaking with the young people and going through the process of data analysis, I wanted to look at I guess the first things that emerged was looking at the broader context in which young people who experience sexualized exploitation in residential care live, and realizing that there was a really strong correlation between the kind of structural issues within out of home care or within residential care and the risk and responses they received to CSE or sexualized exploitation. So the young people provided really consistent accounts of feeling highly stigmatized and marginalized as a result of having a care identity. So they felt that oftentimes police, their residential care workers or child protection workers, or even just members of the public that they were coming into contact with, treated them differently when they became aware that they were a child from out of home care. That was also kind of evident in the police findings as well, when they spoke with using quite stigmatizing language to describe young people in care, which I'll touch on in a slide or two. It was an interesting contrast, though, as well, because the young people um, also spoke at length about feeling that they were emotionally neglected in care. So they kind of had these uh, really like negative attributes kind of forced upon them in the responses they received, but simultaneously they were really disconnected from others. They described workers staying locked in their office for hours on end. Some described not having their basic needs met, not being able to access even toilet paper when they needed because the workers wouldn't come out of the office, which was also closely tied to the notion of being criminalized. So you can see there, there's a couple of the quotes I think allude to it, is that kind of notion of criminality that seems to be tied in with being a young person in care. So some of them spoke about the police kind of uh, treating them differently and criminalizing them when they were aware that they were kids from care. But simultaneously, they often use language about being in a prison within the care home, and also the the workers themselves treating the young people and being scared of the young people because they were violent and they were viewed as offenders. Um, so moving on to how that kind of correlated with the responses to uh, child sexual exploitation. I felt that the conditions that the young people were living in and the responses that they received to child sexual exploitation really overlapped. So a lot of the young people, because of these kind of unmet needs that they described, because of the stigma, the emotional neglect, the kind of constraint and criminalization that they experienced in care, that kind of left them with these unmet needs for things like a sense of belonging, um, emotional connection with others, a sense of safety, that had kind of become distorted by the residential care system. So a lot of the young people spoke about the reasons for why they might leave care or they might go missing, which we know is a significant risk indicator for child sexual exploitation, being as a result of feeling criminalized or feeling like they were kind of constrained in the care home. So you can see some of the quotes there on the screen. It's just things like
Oh, it's a dog.
if you want to go and have friends, you've got somewhere else you you've got to stay somewhere else, and you've got to go get another person to provide that for you, the house. So that actually ended up being the title of my PhD, because I thought it was just so telling that the young people, they didn't want to end up in situations where they were potentially going to be exploited. They just wanted to feel like a regular young person and have their kind of most basic needs met, which were completely age appropriate for them as young people. It was also really evident that those other themes like blame and stigma really also presented themselves in the responses to CSE. Young people provided multiple examples of victim blaming from police or from residential care staff, that suggested that they weren't viewed as kind of ideal victims, or that they were viewed as kind of the instigators of their own abuse. That also again presented itself in some of the interviews with police, who kind of shared similar perceptions around young people who they viewed as being not necessarily victims, more so troublemakers or people causing harm. Again, also bringing it back to the other kind of themes that emerged in the last slide, things like being emotionally neglected. I think this first quote here really speaks to that. The most basic needs for emotional connection with others that, when unmet and not adequately, provided within the care home, um, compounding with past histories of trauma as well, created these really high kind of risk environments where young people were seeking that, again, quite um, developmentally appropriate need for security and safety outside of the care home. Just one last thing on this slide. There was also a lot of evidence. I'm going to talk about in the next. Want to. I really wanted to, I guess, focus on the the young people's voices, but I thought it was really important to share some of the findings from police as well. So in my interviews with police, there was a really wide variation about their understanding of what child sexual exploitation is. Now, that's not unreasonable given the fact that the police don't actually have an operational definition of CSE that's available currently. But there was, it seemed that for the police that did have a more kind of robust understanding of CSE, it was due to their own kind of research or interest in the area rather than being a police wide kind of initiative. The really kind of disturbing findings from the police as well were the extent to which some of them had extremely negative perceptions towards young people in care, and that they weren't really able to differentiate being in care with being a criminal or some form of criminal offending. I asked all the police about responses to missing persons, which we know is not only a risk indicator for CSE, but is quite a common issue for young people in out of home care. A lot of the police kind of describe this as being a burden on their resources. You can see here on the quote, the volume of all these kids going missing every day. It's not worth our time to be actively looking for them, and then describing them as the shit kids on the street. So these kind of stigmatizing perceptions that the young people described experiencing were really, in some instances, corroborated by the interviews with police who simultaneously shared those views. There was also a fair bit of victim blaming by some of the police. So using language like cash cow, describing young people as engaging in sex work or enjoying the attention and disseminating photos of their bodies to others. So it was really interesting to see all of these findings and all these experiences that were described by young people in many ways be actually corroborated by the police's perceptions and the interviews with them. So yes, I putting that all together, I created a model which kind of is a pathway that I propose increases risk for CSE in residential care. So you can see those themes being neglect, constraint, stigma, and being criminalized. I propose that those leave these young people with unmet needs for choice, agency, connection, safety, and belonging. And then those needs can be easily exploited or leveraged by perpetrators who offer young people the perception of a sense of belonging or having those needs met. And obviously, they intersect as well with all of those other sources of marginalization that young people in residential care are likely to experience, including, but not limited to, sexism, racism, ageism, ableism, and classism, which were the most kind of prevalent themes that the young people spoke about. But I also wanted to mention trauma and resistance because although young people spoke a lot about having long, complex histories of trauma that had really impacted them, they also spoke about, and the theme of resistance was really evident in a lot of their in a lot of the interviews with them. Not only resistance against the kind of actions of perpetrators who they knew were trying to harm them, but also resistance against a system that was oppressive and marginalizing of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina. So questions, I'm just going to come up to help with any of the questions on the Zoom. So any questions that people have, please?
One in the room, if that's all right.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Georgie. Nina, first of all, well done. I was looking at your the finding slides in terms of young people and police, and often in research we talk about hidden stories, perceiving them to be from vulnerable and marginalised groups. And well done on finding the hidden stories from the police, because the fact that you are able to build that space with them for them to tell the truth about what they truly thought is an amazing contribution to the evidence base. My question to you is, who do you think needs to learn about your PhD findings?
I honestly feel like everybody needs to learn about it. But but I think that the justice system and that the policing system and the higher ups that decide what is and isn't appropriate for police to, even learn about in the academy need to hear about this and also be aware of the really problematic um, accounts from some of the police about their practice, as well as the out of home care system more broadly as well. 100%.
Hey, thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Hi. Thank you, Nina. It's so amazing. I was just like thinking it's kind of sad that it is as if like for young people wanting good things in life like care and
Mm,
also yeah, maybe the sex itself is something wrong, but
mm,
other people buying their bodies is okay.
mm.
It's just like but I wonder what kind of vignettes are you using for the methodology?
Oh, for my methodology? Yeah, so I wrote like a 3-part case study that kind of described a quite typical scenario where a young person in residential care was at risk of being exploited. So kind of like going missing on multiple occasions and spending time with an older man, having like a sexual relationship with him, drugs and alcohol being involved. I used the literature to kind of formulate that, and then I also spoke to the broader kind of team that we were working with as part of the big project and got some feedback about it. I had to make it a bit more age appropriate. That was some of the feedback I first got because I kind of used more academic language. But I used a case study with both police and um, young people, which was such a great tool in the end because, for example, a lot of the police, when I first asked them, do you know anything about CSE, they said no. And then when I shared the case study, they said, oh yeah, we see this every day. um, so it was a really useful tool. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Got some comments from our online participants. So out of home care system and police absolutely need to read your important PhD. Thanks, Zilla. Thank you for that. And Michael said, amazing. I will share your research with the teams in my organization. Lubna has a question. Thanks, Lubna.
Hi, great work, Nina. So powerful and awful at the same time. I just had a question around the responses you got in terms of gender. Did you notice or observe any gender differences?
Yeah, so there was a bit of a kind of like polarizing gender split in my um in my in my data. So in the young people, there was 9 out of 10 of the young people I interviewed were girls. And then the police, out of 13, 11 of them were male police officers. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess there was probably like a limitation of the study. Um, the idea to identify the police as best I could because some of the most, I guess, frank disclosures about police practice came from one of the female police officers about other practice that she was seeing within the police force, which was interesting. Yeah.
Awesome. Join me in thanking Nina Melander.
Thank you so much, Nina. And